My sister dropped her kid off at my daughter's 7th birthday party and abandoned her to find herself. My sister dropped her kid at my daughter's 7th birthday party and didn't come back for 15 years. Didn't come back that day. Didn't come back, period. It was supposed to be a princess party. 20 screaming kids, bounce house, the works. Kleiner showed up late with 4-year-old Carrie, no gift, already on her phone. Just need to grab something from the car, she said. I found Carrie crying behind the bounce house 3 hours later, clutching a note. She's better off with you. Don't call. Don't call? She'd already blocked us on everything and disconnected her phone. The cops said that unless I wanted Carrie in foster care, keep her while they investigated. They never found Kleiner. She'd cleared out her apartment that same morning, told her landlord she was moving to Europe for love. Carrie cried for her mom every night for 6 months. 6 months of when's mommy coming back? While I'm washing her only pair of pajamas at midnight because she'd wet the bed again. My husband Mateo and I weren't rich. 2 kids already, mortgage, his teacher salary, and my part-time accounting work. But what do? You make it work. We enrolled her in school, therapy, dance classes with our daughter Yaslin, bought bunk beds, stretched every dollar, held her through nightmares, homework, first periods, and first heartbreaks. 15 years of parent-teacher conferences where I'm explaining why I'm not on the paperwork, but I'm all she's got. 15 years of Mother's Days where she makes me cards but cries in her room after. The whole time, not one word from Kleiner. Not when Carrie won the state science fair. Not when she graduated from middle school with honors. Not when she got into the National Honor Society. Nothing. My mom helped when she could. Loved Carrie like her own blood. Always said, that child was meant to be ours. Mom left her little house too. All my grandchildren equal shares when she passed last month. Nothing fancy. A 1960s 2-bedroom worth maybe $200,000. But in this market, enough to help with college. The will reading was yesterday. We're sitting in the lawyer's office. Mateo, me, Yaslin, our son Matt, and Carrie. All of a sudden, a door flies open. Kleiner, designer everything, fresh lips and Botox, wheeling in a Louis Vuitton suitcase. Sorry I'm late. Traffic from the airport was awful. Like she'd just stepped out for coffee. Not abandoned her child for 15 years. Carrie went rigid. Yaslin grabbed her hand. Kleiner sat down, pulled out her phone, and started recording. For legal purposes, she said, smiling at Carrie. Hi baby, mommy's here now. The lawyer read the will. 4 grandchildren, equal shares. Kleiner actually laughed. Perfect. Carrie's quarter will cover my Dubai investment property down payment. I lost it. You abandoned her. You don't get to. She's my daughter, my property, my inheritance. She looked at Carrie. You understand, right baby? Mommy had to find herself, but I never stopped loving you. And now we can be together. You'll sign the papers, and maybe we can have lunch sometime. Carrie stared at her. You left me at a birthday party. Oh sweetie, don't be dramatic. I knew your aunt would take care of you. I basically gave her a free daughter. She should be paying me. She turned to the lawyer. So where does my daughter sign? The lawyer cleared his throat. There's one more section. He read, should any biological parent who has been absent from their child's life for more than 1 calendar year attempt to claim, coerce, or obtain through any means said child's inheritance, that child's portion shall immediately transfer to an educational scholarship fund in their name, accessible only for tuition, which cannot be accessed by any parent or guardian, only the beneficiary themselves upon reaching age 18. Kleiner's phone clattered to the floor. Furthermore, he continued, evidence of such an attempt will trigger an immediate audit of any governmental support fraud related to said abandoned child. See, Carrie and I had visited mom the week before she died, told her everything. Mom was a paralegal for 40 years. She knew exactly what she was doing. Kleiner stood up so fast her chair fell. You poisoned her against me. This is manipulation. I'll sue. For what? Carrie's voice was steady. Grandma left me money for college. You tried to take it. Now it's protected. Kleiner grabbed Carrie's arm. You owe me. I gave you life. Mateo stepped between them. And then you gave her away, like she was nothing. Kleiner looked at Carrie one more time. You were supposed to be my retirement plan. Those were the words that gave Carrie closure, what she needed since she was abandoned. Kleiner grabbed her suitcase and left, slammed every door on the way out. Carrie's crying now, but she's smiling too. The scholarship fund will pay for her entire education. Kleiner can't touch a penny. Carrie starts college next fall, pre-law. Says she wants to help abandoned kids. I always knew something was wrong with my daughter. I just didn't know what. My daughter was 4 when I first noticed something was off. We were at the playground and all the kids her age were climbing the jungle gym or going down slides, but not my Clara. She stood perfectly still, her eyes closed, face tilted toward the sky. When I asked her if she wanted to play, she said, I am playing mommy. I'm listening to the yellow music the swings make. I smiled, assuming it was just imagination, but then she refused to eat her carrots at dinner. Why won't you eat them, sweetheart? Because orange tastes too loud today. It's hurting my ears. Then her preschool called me in for a meeting. Clara is a sweet child, her teacher said carefully, but she's been concerning the other children. I asked what she meant and she said, she keeps telling the other kids what colors their feelings are. Yesterday she told a girl that her sadness was sharp yellow triangles and started crying because the shapes were too pointy. She refuses to sit near certain children because their voices taste like metal or their laughter smells purple. The children think she's strange. At home things escalated too. Clara would wake up screaming, the red noise is too loud, make it stop. There was no noise, and she'd draw the most incredible pictures, swirling colors that somehow captured emotions perfectly, even though she was only 4. Mommy, your worry is getting spiky purple again, she told me one evening, looking up from a drawing of jagged purple lines. Are you scared of me? Oh baby, no, I said, pulling her close. I'm not scared of you, I'm scared for you. My pediatrician referred us to a neurologist. After extensive testing, he called me into his office. Your daughter has severe synesthesia, he explained. She experiences sensory crossover. Sounds have colors, emotions have shapes, tastes have sounds. It's fascinating actually. Most synesthetes have mild crossover between 2 senses. Clara has crossover between all of them. Then his face grew serious. The intensity of Clara's synesthesia isn't normal. That's why we ran further tests. Clara has a tumor in her temporal lobe. It's what's causing her synesthesia to be so pronounced. The room spun. He said, it's growing slowly, pressing on multiple sensory processing areas. The tumor is essentially rewiring her brain to create these extraordinary sensory experiences. I begged him to remove it, but he told me it was inoperable. There was nothing they could do. He estimated she had 2 years to live, maybe less, and that during that time her synesthesia would worsen. I drove home in a daze. Clara was waiting on the porch with her babysitter and her face lit up when she saw me. She said, Mommy, did they find out what's wrong with me? You smell like broken glass. I took a deep breath and said, they realized nothing is wrong with you, sweetheart. Nothing at all. Over the next months, I tried to memorize every part of Clara. I saved all of her artwork, her beautiful descriptions of the world only she could see. The sunset is singing tonight, she told me one evening as we sat on the porch. Can you hear it? I said, I wish I could, baby. Her symptoms worsened gradually. She got headaches that made her curl up in dark rooms. The pain is bright white with red edges, she'd whisper. But if I think about purple rain sounds, it gets smaller. School became impossible because the fluorescent lights screamed in yellow, and other children's voices tasted like sandpaper, so she stayed home with me. One night she climbed into my bed, her small hand finding mine in the darkness. Mommy, I need to tell you something important. My head pictures are getting bigger and scarier. The colors are starting to hurt instead of being pretty. I said, Clara, you're staying right here with me. We'll figure out how to make them pretty again. But 3 weeks later, she collapsed during breakfast, her hands pressed against her ears. Everything's too loud. All the colors are screaming. In the hospital, surrounded by beeping machines, she looked terrified at first. Mommy, the machine colors are so bright. They're making rainbow waterfalls. eyeballs, but then she smiled weakly. Wait, they're not scary anymore. They're beautiful. Like a light show just for me. The monitor showed her brain activity spiking in impossible patterns. In her final moments, she reached up as if touching something invisible. Look, mommy, she whispered. Everything is singing in colors now. It's so beautiful. And then she took her last breath, and the most incredible soul I've ever met left this world. At her funeral, I placed her artwork in her small casket. Hundreds of drawings showing a world of impossible beauty that only she could see emotions as colors, sounds as shapes, a universe where every sensation was transformed into art. That's when I knew that her condition wasn't a disease. It was a window into something beautiful that the rest of us are too limited to perceive. I took everything that's mine when my roommate asked me to move out. So I was living with this girl, Megan, who I thought was my friend. We'd known each other since freshman year, and when she said she found this perfect apartment and wanted me to sign the lease with her, I jumped at it. 5 months of splitting everything 50-50, doing dishes like good little roommates, never fighting over anything. Then one random Tuesday, I get this text while I'm at my job at the campus bookstore. Hey, we need to talk when you get home. That's never good, right? So I'm driving back thinking maybe she wants to talk about whose turn it is to buy toilet paper or something stupid like that. But when I walk in, she's sitting on our couch with this weird serious face. She starts with, "So I've been thinking," and I already know I'm screwed. She tells me she doesn't think living together is working out, and that she already talked to our landlord about me moving out by January 1st. I'm just sitting there like, what the hell? Because we literally never fought. I paid my half of everything on time. I cleaned up after myself, and I even bought all the good stuff for our place. But she's acting like I'm some nightmare roommate who's been making her life miserable. I don't argue because honestly, why would I want to live with someone who doesn't want me there? So I tell her fine, I'll start looking for a new place. She seems relieved, like she was expecting me to throw a fit or something. That night, I'm lying in bed thinking about how I need to pack everything, and that's when it hits me. I look around our apartment and realize I bought literally everything that makes it nice. The 50-inch TV mounted on the wall, mine, the leather couch we're always watching Netflix on. I saved up 3 paychecks for that thing, the coffee maker, the good plates instead of paper ones, the router for our internet, even the freaking shower curtain. The next morning I tell Megan I'll be taking all my stuff when I move out. She just says, okay, like it's no big deal. I don't think she really thought about what that meant. I spent the next 2 weeks apartment hunting and found this decent 1-bedroom across town. On moving day, I rented one of those big U-Haul trucks because I knew I'd need it. Megan wasn't even home, which was probably for the best. I started with the obvious stuff like my clothes and my desk. Then I unplugged the TV and carefully took it down from the wall. I wrapped up the coffee maker, packed all the dishes I'd bought from Target, and loaded the couch onto the truck with help from my buddy Jake. The router was the last thing I grabbed. I unpacked all the Ethernet cables and took the whole setup. As I'm walking out with it, I realize she's going to have zero internet until she gets her own. But here's the thing that really made me laugh. When I was packing up the kitchen stuff, I realized I'd bought all the cooking supplies too. The pans, the good knife set, even the can opener. I left her with basically nothing except a mini fridge and some random cups she had from high school. By the time I finished loading everything, the apartment looked like nobody had ever lived there. Just empty rooms with some random junk scattered around that wasn't worth taking. I drive to my new place feeling pretty good about myself. I'm unpacking when my phone starts blowing up. First it's texts, then calls. Megan is absolutely losing it. "What the hell did you do to the apartment?" she screams when I finally pick up. "It's completely empty." I tell her calmly that I took everything I paid for, just like I said I would. She starts yelling about how she looks like an idiot because her friends were supposed to come over that night and now there's nowhere to sit and nothing to watch. "You can't just take everything," she says. How am I supposed to explain this? I remind her that she literally said okay when I told her I was taking my stuff. She hangs up on me.
My lazy husband told me to get off my ass 2 days after giving birth and cook for his parents. I was sitting in the nursery at 2 in the afternoon, still in the same pajamas from the hospital. My body was still recovering from the delivery, and even sitting up was painful. Every time I stood up, my stitches pulled and I had to grip the wall to keep from passing out. Our daughter was 48 hours old, and I hadn't slept more than 20 minutes at a time since we got home. He walked in while I was trying to get her to latch. She'd been crying for 45 minutes, and I was in so much pain from breastfeeding I could barely keep it together. He didn't ask if I was okay or if I needed anything. He just said his parents were coming over at 6, and I needed to make his mom's pot roast, the one that takes 4 hours, with the garlic mashed potatoes and the green beans she likes and homemade rolls. I looked up at him thinking he was joking. He wasn't smiling. I said I can barely walk to the bathroom without wanting to scream. Every time I stood, I felt like my whole body was tearing apart. He got this annoyed look on his face like I was being dramatic. That's when he said it. "You've been sitting around for 2 days doing nothing. I need you to get off your lazy ass and act like a wife." My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the baby. I asked him if he was serious right now. He said his parents drove 2 hours to meet their granddaughter, and the least I could do was feed them a decent meal. I told him I physically could not stand at the stove for 4 hours. My doctor said my body was still healing from the delivery, and it would take 6 weeks before I could do anything strenuous. He actually rolled his eyes at me, said every woman goes through this, and they all managed to cook dinner, that his mom had 5 kids and never complained once. Then he walked out. I sat there holding our screaming baby, trying not to have a complete breakdown. An hour later, I heard voices downstairs. His parents had shown up 3 hours early with grocery bags. I heard his mom asking where I was, and him saying I was upstairs resting like I'd been doing all day, like I was being lazy. I was trying to change the baby's diaper when his mom knocked softly and came in. She took one look at me, and her whole face changed. She asked what was wrong. I just broke down, told her everything he said. How he called me lazy. How he demanded I cook for hours when I could barely stand. How he'd been acting weird and distant since we came home from the hospital. How he hadn't held the baby once without me asking him to. She went completely white, didn't say a word, just turned around and went back downstairs. I heard her screaming at him. I'd never heard her raise her voice before in the 3 years I'd known her. She was asking him what the hell was wrong with him. Why would he tell me she wanted pot roast when she never said that? Why would he lie about something like that? He tried to defend himself, but she cut him off. She said she brought Chinese takeout specifically so I wouldn't have to cook. That she remembered how hard those first few days were. How she could barely sit down after her first baby. His dad came upstairs and asked if he could hold the baby. His hands were gentle and he had tears in his eyes. He apologized for raising a son who would treat his wife like this 48 hours after giving birth. Downstairs, his mom was still going. She found out he'd made the whole dinner thing up because he was mad I wasn't paying attention to him anymore. He actually admitted he thought having a baby would be different, that I'd still have time for him, that I'd still want to be physical again soon. His dad handed me the baby and went downstairs. I heard him tell my husband to pack a bag, that he raised him better than this, and until he figured out how to be a man, he wasn't welcome in this house. My husband tried to argue, said I was exaggerating. His dad said if he said one more word, he'd throw his stuff stuff on the lawn himself. His mom came back up with the Chinese food and sat with me while I ate. She set up the bassinet and changed the baby while I took my first real shower in 3 days. She even washed my hair for me because I couldn't lift my arms above my head. His dad carried his duffel bag to the car. I watched from the window as my husband got in and drove away. That was a week ago. He's been calling from his friend's couch every single day, leaving voicemails saying I overreacted, that his parents turned on him, that everyone's being dramatic, and I'm keeping his daughter from him. His mom texts me every morning asking how we slept. She came over yesterday with groceries and meal prep containers, held the baby while I napped for 4 hours. His dad called last night, said his son needs to grovel on his knees before he's allowed back in this house. Said any man who calls his postpartum wife lazy doesn't deserve to be called a father. I'm not answering my husband's calls anymore. His mom said I can stay here as long as I need to.
When did you stop being the daughter and become the mom? My sister Maisie was 2 days old when the doctor said Down syndrome, and I watched my mother's face collapse like someone had punched her in the chest. The doctor was explaining developmental delays, early intervention programs, speech therapy. Mom just stared at the wall, refusing to look at either of us. Mrs. Miller, do you have any questions? The doctor asked gently. Mom turned her head toward him. How bad will it get? Not what can we do to help her? Not what does she need? Just how bad? I was 10 and stupid enough to think she'd adjust. We used to be the kind of family that had movie nights every Friday, where mom would make popcorn and we'd eat and snuggle up on the couch. But that version of mom died the second she heard Down syndrome. By the time Maisie was 6 months old and mom went back to work, she started coming home late, stuck at the office, she'd say, but I could smell the wine on her breath. By the time Maisie was 3, she'd perfected the art of being physically present but emotionally gone. She'd walk past her during breakfast without a word, step over her toys, turn up the TV when she tried to babble at her. I kept making excuses. She's scared, give her time. Then one day I came home from school and found Maisie sitting on the couch in soaked pajamas. 4 years old, just sitting there in her own urine because mom was in her bedroom and she couldn't communicate what she needed. She looked up at me, about to cry. I cleaned her up, then marched to the bedroom. Mom was reorganizing her closet. She sat in piss for God knows how long. I said, where were you? She didn't even turn around. I can't do this anymore. Can't do what? Be a mother? This isn't the life I signed up for. She slammed a shoebox onto the shelf. Everyone expects me to be this perfect, loving mother, but they don't have to live with it. The stares when people see her face, the therapy appointments, my kid isn't normal. I'm here, aren't I? That's when I lost hope she'd ever change, but I was still just a kid. What could I do? I spent the next 3 years watching it get worse, hating that I couldn't fix it. Maisie had been working hard in speech therapy, and her speech was thick and slow, but she was so proud of her progress. I came home one afternoon to find her in the living room while mom made dinner. Maisie walked up carefully, grabbed mom's sleeve, and said slowly, I love you, mama. Mom froze, put down the knife, and looked at her like she'd said something horrible. Don't, she said quietly. Just don't do that. Maisie's smile died, but I don't want to hear it. She walked past her and locked herself in her bedroom. She stood there, tears rolling down her cheeks. I pulled her into a hug. That's when I stopped being her sister and became her person. I dropped out my senior year, got a job at the grocery store, paid for programs insurance wouldn't cover, spent hours practicing reading with her, celebrated every tiny victory. I even made sure she had birthday parties with friends who loved her. Then when Maisie was 10, mom just stopped coming home. She packed her things one weekend while we were out and left her keys on the counter. I took over the rent. Maisie asked once why mama left. Some people don't know how to love right, I told her, and she never brought it up again. Until last week, when my phone rang with an unknown number. It was mom. Hey sweetie, she said, like we talked yesterday. My boyfriend wants to meet you and Maisie. He doesn't understand why we don't talk. My chest tightened. What did you tell him? That we had a falling out years ago. Different priorities, you know. Can you please just come to dinner? The audacity. This woman abandoned her disabled daughter and now wanted me to help her lie to keep her boyfriend happy. What am I supposed to say happened? I asked. Just that we grew apart. Maybe I was overwhelmed and you were independent. Normal stuff. Normal. She called abandoning Maisie normal. I agreed, but I wasn't going to save her relationship. I was going to destroy it. I texted her later. Thanks for reaching out. Looking forward to meeting him. She responded with heart emojis. The woman who couldn't look at Maisie for 14 years was sending hearts. The next week crawled by. The night of the dinner, I wore my best dress and brought expensive wine. Maisie came with me, quiet but watching everything, playing the perfect daughters she never let us be. David was lovely. He talked about family being everything and how excited he was to finally meet us. Perfect. So, he finally asked over dinner, what really happened between you guys? Mom was relaxed now, confident I'd stick to the script. She even smiled at me. I pulled out my phone. David, want to see what really happened? I showed him photos. Maisie's first day of high school, her learning to ride a bike at 15, her first job. Do you see mom in any of these? He studied them, confused. No, I don't. That's because she wasn't there. We haven't seen her in 14 years. Maisie smiled at me when she realized what I was doing. David looked at mom, whose face had gone pale. Is this true? She couldn't even deny it. David got up, looked at us, and said, you guys deserve so much better, before walking out. Mom ran after him. She came back 10 minutes later, mascara running down her face. Are you happy? You just ruined the best relationship I've ever had. I smiled. Your daughter should have been the best relationship you ever had, but you walked away the second Maisie wasn't perfect. Now you know how it feels.
After my wife died, her son said, we want the estate, the business, everything. My lawyer begged me to fight. I said, give it all to them. Everyone thought I'd lost my mind. At the final hearing, I signed the papers. The boys smiled until their lawyer turned pale when he read, married 11 years. Her sons from her first marriage never called me anything but him. She built the business from nothing. 40 employees, contracts that took a decade to land, never on paper as an owner. She died in March, fast, gone in 11 weeks. The older son called for the first time in years, said the estate needed to be handled properly given the circumstances. The circumstances being that I wasn't blood. Certified letters followed, wanting the house, the business, the accounts, everything with her name on it. Since that had always been our arrangement. Hers on paper, ours in practice. My lawyer was furious, said we had a real shot. I told him to drop all of it. Everything. No fight, no counteroffer. When he asked if it was grief talking, I told him it wasn't. I needed the document drafted exactly as asked. Full transfer, full waiver, every asset named individually instead of lumped as the estate. Unusual, he said. But he agreed once I explained why. The sons couldn't believe their luck. In the meetings before the hearing, I said almost nothing. Just let them talk about how their mother would have wanted this. By the second meeting, they'd stopped watching me closely at all. The way you stop watching something once you've decided it's already yours. The morning of the final hearing, I wore the suit she'd picked out for our last anniversary dinner. The one she said made me look like I actually owned a suit for once. I sat across from the boys and their attorney at a long table that still smelled like fresh polish, and for the first time since she died, I felt something close to calm settle into my chest. While we waited for the judge, the younger son leaned toward his brother and said, not quietly enough, that he'd already gotten a call about a buyer for the house, someone willing to close fast, cash. The older one asked about the business next, whether they should keep it running or sell the whole thing off in pieces. Their attorney told them to wait until the paperwork was final before making any calls, and the older son laughed and said, what paperwork? It's already done. He's just signing it. The judge read through the waiver line by line, methodical, almost bored by how uncontested it all was, asking after each item if I understood I was relinquishing all claim voluntarily and without coercion. I said yes every time. The house, yes. The business, all assets and equipment, yes. The vehicles, yes. The accounts, counts? Yes. The older son was already half smiling by the third item, that particular smile people get when they're trying not to look too pleased in front of a judge. By the sixth, the younger one had his phone resting in his lap under the table, thumbs moving, probably telling someone it was really happening. Their attorney kept glancing at me like he was waiting for a catch that never came. Some objection, some last-second change of heart, none came. Nobody in that room was watching me closely anymore, and I understood, sitting there, that this was exactly the moment I'd been waiting 8 months for them to reach. I signed the last page. The judge set down her pen and asked if either party had anything further to add before the matter was closed. Their attorney stood first, practically glowing, and said, no, everything was in order. His clients were entirely satisfied with the resolution as documented. Then, almost as an afterthought, he picked a final page back up to double-check the asset list against his own copy. His finger traced down the column of items, house, business, vehicles, accounts, the same list we'd already gone through out loud a minute earlier. He got to the bottom entry and stopped. He went back up to the top and started again, slower this time, mouthing the words. Not a skim, an actual read word for word, the slow, deliberate kind you do when something makes you go back and check you saw it correctly the first time. His face changed color in 4 seconds. He asked for a recess, pulled both sons into the hallway, and through the door his voice went from calm to something close to panic. What none of them checked, their attorney was so focused on catching me hiding something, he never looked at what the business actually was on paper, is that 8 months before she died, before she knew she was sick, my wife filed me as sole licensed operator of record on a state contract after a client required vendor-side leadership personally bonded and certified. The company was hers, now theirs, exactly as agreed. The contract, worth more than the rest of the business combined, quietly funding nearly everything else, was licensed to me, non-transferable without new certification, 11 months minimum, history they didn't have. They got the company, not the thing keeping it alive. Their attorney came back alone, asked for a continuance to review a licensing matter. I said nothing. Everything I'd agreed to sign, I'd already signed.
I always knew something was wrong with my daughter. I just didn't know what. My daughter was 4 when I first noticed something was off. We were at the playground and all the kids her age were climbing the jungle gym or going down slides, but not my Clara. She stood perfectly still, her eyes closed, face tilted toward the sky. When I asked her if she wanted to play, she said, I am playing mommy. I'm listening to the yellow music the swings make. I smiled, assuming it was just imagination, but then she refused to eat her carrots at dinner. Why won't you eat them, sweetheart? Because orange tastes too loud today. It's hurting my ears. Then her preschool called me in for a meeting. Clara is a sweet child, her teacher said carefully, but she's been concerning the other children. I asked what she meant and she said, she keeps telling the other kids what colors their feelings are. Yesterday she told a girl that her sadness was sharp yellow triangles and started crying because the shapes were too pointy. She refuses to sit near certain children because their voices taste like metal or their laughter smells purple. The children think she's strange. At home things escalated too. Clara would wake up screaming, the red noise is too loud, make it stop. There was no noise, and she'd draw the most incredible pictures, swirling colors that somehow captured emotions perfectly, even though she was only 4. Mommy, your worry is getting spiky purple again, she told me one evening, looking up from a drawing of jagged purple lines. Are you scared of me? Oh baby, no, I said, pulling her close. I'm not scared of you, I'm scared for you. My pediatrician referred us to a neurologist. After extensive testing, he called me into his office. Your daughter has severe synesthesia, he explained. She experiences sensory crossover. Sounds have colors, emotions have shapes, tastes have sounds. It's fascinating, actually. Most synesthetes have mild crossover between 2 senses. Clara has crossover between all of them. Then his face grew serious. The intensity of Clara's synesthesia isn't normal. That's why we ran further tests. Clara has a tumor in her temporal lobe. It's what's causing her synesthesia to be so pronounced. The room spun. He said, it's growing slowly, pressing on multiple sensory processing areas. The tumor is essentially rewiring her brain to create these extraordinary sensory experiences. I begged him to remove it, but he told me it was inoperable. There was nothing they could do. He estimated she had 2 years to live, maybe less, and that during that time her synesthesia would worsen. I drove home in a daze. Clara was waiting on the porch with her babysitter and her face lit up when she saw me. She said, Mommy, did they find out what's wrong with me? You smell like broken glass. I took a deep breath and said, they realized nothing is wrong with you, sweetheart. Nothing at all. Over the next months, I tried to memorize every part of Clara. I saved all of her artwork, her beautiful descriptions of the world only she could see. The sunset is singing tonight, she told me one evening as we sat on the porch. Can you hear it? I said, I wish I could, baby. Her symptoms worsened gradually. She got headaches that made her curl up in dark rooms. The pain is bright white with red edges, she'd whisper. But if I think about purple rain sounds, it gets smaller. School became impossible because the fluorescent lights screamed in yellow, and other children's voices tasted like sandpaper, so she stayed home with me. One night, she climbed into my bed, her small hand finding mine in the darkness. Mommy, I need to tell you something important. My head pictures are getting bigger and scarier. The colors are starting to hurt instead of being pretty. I said, Clara, you're staying right here with me. We'll figure out how to make them pretty again. But 3 weeks later, she collapsed during breakfast, her hands pressed against her ears. Everything's too loud. All the colors are screaming. In the hospital, surrounded by beeping machines, she looked terrified at first. Mommy, the machine colors are so bright. They're making rainbow waterfalls. But then she smiled weakly. Wait, they're not scary anymore. They're beautiful. Like a light show just for me. The monitors showed her brain activity spiking in impossible patterns. In her final moments, she reached up as if touching something invisible. Look, Mommy, she whispered. Everything is singing in colors now. It's so beautiful. And then she took her last breath, and the most incredible soul I've ever met left this world. At her funeral, I placed her artwork in her small casket. Hundreds of drawings showing a world of impossible beauty that only she could see emotions as colors, sounds as shapes, a universe where every sensation was transformed into art. That's when I knew that her condition wasn't a disease. It was a window into something beautiful that the rest of us are too limited to perceive.